The United States has a very important push on making sure that China does step up its purchases of soybeans. How is that going?
Right there, Scott Bessent is cornered about the failing trade deal with China. The United States is struggling, and China now holds the strongest cards. There is fear in Washington, panic on Wall Street, and confusion inside the White House. Because China is quietly making new demands, and some of those demands now include Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan might soon become a bargaining chip. And the uncomfortable truth is that Trump has no leverage left in this game.
There have been some reports coming from China where their take on this talk is a little different. At least what they emphasized in the talks was a little different. They bring up both Ukraine and the U.S. position and the Chinese position on Taiwan. What is the U.S. position on Taiwan at this point?
As you can see, Trump's Ukraine peace deal just backfired in the worst way. Trump is pressuring Ukraine to accept a peace deal with Russia. But China is watching every move. And now Beijing wants something in return for continuing to buy billions of dollars worth of soybeans and for keeping rare earth supplies flowing. Rare earths, materials America desperately needs for missiles, electric vehicles, medical equipment, AI systems, and even fighter jets. Without them, the United States falls behind. Scott Bessent was asked directly if America is now at the mercy of China, and the look on his face said far more than his words ever could.
Am I right to think that this is a truce, but maybe a little bit of an uneasy truce at this point? How secure and settled are you feeling with where we stand with China right now?
Well, we have a 1 year, what I would say, pause.
Did you hear that? He openly admitted there is no real deal with China. No guarantees, no commitment, no trust. Only uncertainty, risk, and fear. But this is not even the worst part. China just blocked NVIDIA chips from being used by ByteDance, the massive company behind TikTok. And at the same time, Russia is stepping into Venezuela, purchasing oil right under the nose of the US Navy. And the Navy couldn't stop it. 3 crises are hitting at the same time: soybeans, chips, and oil. And Bessent couldn't deny it. Global power is shifting, quietly, fast, and dangerously. There is so much to uncover. So before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button, stay alert, and now, let's get right into it. The interview opened with a question that looked simple but carried massive consequences. Would China keep its promise to buy US soybeans? On live television, Scott Bessent admitted that China had indeed honored its commitments so far. He was practically urging Americans to trust China, something no Treasury Secretary wants to do on camera. That moment mattered. It signaled that despite rising tensions, the agricultural lifeline between both countries is still intact. And right now, the US economy quietly depends on it. According to Bessent's own public statements, China agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans between November and December 2025, followed by 25 million tons per year in 2026, 2027, and 2028. Analysts estimate that if China fully meets those volumes, the deal could generate over $32 billion in farm receipts across the next few years. And the orders are already starting. China recently purchased at least 10 US soybean cargoes, around $300 million, after a high-level diplomatic call pushed trade talks forward. So, depending on how much China follows through, the deal could mean anything from a few $100 million in the short term to tens of billions over the long term. What most people don't realize is how exposed American agriculture really is. Soybeans are one of the country's largest farm exports, and China is the world's largest buyer. If that market stays open, rural America breathes easier. If it closes, thousands of farms immediately face financial danger. This is exactly why Trump is under pressure. Farming states are demanding he maintain market access to China. These are states he must keep on his side. Losing them means losing political ground fast. Keeping China engaged is not just economic policy, it's political survival. And it doesn't stop at soybeans. Corn is waiting. Pork producers are warning that without Chinese demand, prices could collapse. Grain storage operators, feed companies, and transport firms rely on China too. Once a buyer of that scale walks away, there is no replacement. There are no quick alternatives. That is why this interview mattered. Bessent's admission calmed the markets for a moment, but it didn't end the storm. It simply confirmed how fragile the situation really is. During the interview, Scott Bessent dropped a line that stunned Washington. The rare earth truce with China will last only 1 year. 1 year, and then everything is uncertain. That admission exposed a far deeper problem. The United States has no long-term guarantee that China will keep supplying the minerals that power its economy, its technology, and even its military. Rare earths are not optional. Without them, entire sectors break instantly. Electric vehicle manufacturers rely on neodymium magnets for motors. Without those magnets, production lines stop cold, something U.S. automakers have already experienced. Aerospace and defense systems depend on rare earth alloys for guidance systems, radars, and precision electronics. If supplies tighten, jet programs stall, missile readiness drops, and defense contractors face immediate contract delays. And the financial risk is enormous. A major disruption could erase trillions of dollars in market value across companies like Tesla, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and major electronics and chip manufacturers. When rare earth inputs disappear, revenue projections collapse and valuations follow. This is why Trump is scrambling behind the scenes. Reports suggest he is already calling Xi Jinping, seeking urgent guarantees that supplies will continue beyond the 1-year window. The White House knows the truth. Even a short interruption could trigger market panic, industrial shutdowns, and accusations of strategic failure. For Trump, this is not just an economic headache. It's a direct threat to political credibility and U.S. leverage abroad. Bessent's admission exposed how fragile America's position really is. If China tightens controls after 1 year, the consequences would be immediate, severe, and incredibly difficult to reverse. Trump's phone call with Xi Jinping didn't just revive soybean and rare earth negotiations. It pushed Taiwan straight onto the bargaining table. According to multiple reports, China is now demanding that the U.S. stay out of the Taiwan question, and Beijing made that point directly to Trump. Xi told him that Taiwan's return to China is central to China's worldview, a message that couldn't be clearer. At the same time, a new crisis erupted in Tokyo. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi angered Beijing after saying a Chinese attack on Taiwan could justify a Japanese military response. China exploded in anger, warning its citizens against travel to Japan and accusing Tokyo of reviving militarism. The rhetoric escalated fast, and Trump stepped in. Sources say Trump privately urged Takaichi not to escalate the dispute because he's trying to protect a fragile trade truce with China. He did not ask for a retraction, but the message was unmistakable. Do not provoke Beijing while U.S.-China deal-making is underway. This is where Taiwan becomes a pressure point. Taiwan sits at the heart of global chip production. TSMC produces the advanced logic chips that power smartphones, servers, cars, and even critical military systems. There is no substitute, and global supply chains cannot reroute around Taiwan. Any conflict, diplomatic misstep, or military threat instantly translates into chip shortages, longer lead times, and billion-dollar disruptions. Japan knows this. China knows this. And now Trump knows that Taiwan's semiconductor dominance gives Beijing massive leverage in negotiations. Tokyo fears Trump may soften U.S. support for Taiwan to secure a trade victory with China, a move that could embolden Beijing and destabilize East Asia. When Taiwan becomes part of negotiation instead of strategy, the risk multiplies. It's no longer just a diplomatic issue. It's a global supply chain vulnerability with geopolitical consequences. While Taiwan sits at the center of global chip production, the real financial danger is unfolding back in the United States, inside the AI market itself. The 2025 tech boom has been driven by one assumption: AI adoption will rise endlessly. That assumption is now cracking. Here's the blunt truth. A massive portion of big tech valuations is built on the expectation of continuous AI-driven revenue growth. Cloud providers, chip vendors, and platforms have poured billions into AI expansion, assuming demand will stay explosive and margins will stay high. But valuation is ultimately math, the present value of future cash flows. If those future AI revenues become uncertain, even slightly, the entire calculation collapses. And that uncertainty is coming from one place: China. If China develops cheaper compute, or if access to high-performance hardware becomes restricted, the growth story priced into US markets unravels. Investors see this, and many are now shifting capital into Chinese AI ecosystems, where training is cheaper and scale is growing faster. This isn't abstract theory anymore. Concrete evidence just landed. Chinese regulators have reportedly barred ByteDance from deploying NVIDIA accelerators in new domestic data centers. ByteDance is not a small buyer. It's one of the largest AI model trainers in the world. Blocking NVIDIA chips is not just a commercial roadblock. It's a clear political decision shaping where advanced compute can legally exist inside China. This instantly changes the economics of AI. If companies like ByteDance are forced to shift workloads, redesign architectures, or adopt domestic accelerators, the ripple effects strike NVIDIA and every US cloud provider depending on China's AI demand. Revenue expectations shrink, hardware purchasing cycles shift, and the market begins to reprice risk at scale. The result? A fragile US AI sector exposed to Chinese policy, and a tech wall that divides where the next generation of AI will be built. But China is not standing still while US restrictions limit access to high-performance accelerators like NVIDIA's GPUs. And this is the part that Washington fears most. Companies there are finding clever workarounds to make AI training cheaper and more efficient. They are increasingly splitting workloads, training large models in overseas data centers where access to cutting-edge hardware remains possible, while running inference, the actual application of models, on domestic chips optimized for local performance. They are also improving software stacks and architectures to extract more computation per chip, effectively squeezing more output from lower-cost hardware. This adaptation is a major risk to US firms such as NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. These companies have benefited from premium pricing for top-tier accelerators and CPUs, banking on the assumption that foreign competitors cannot match performance without their chips. If Chinese firms can achieve comparable AI results using cheaper or domestically produced processors, the US vendors face a double hit: reduced demand for high-end hardware and increased competitive pressure globally. It is not just lost sales. It is market share erosion in AI, cloud computing, and next-generation technologies where margins are high and dominance matters. Strategically, this shows that reliance on US hardware is no longer guaranteed. The combination of innovation in chip utilization, offshore training, and domestic inference creates a pathway for China to maintain AI competitiveness independently. For investors and policymakers, the warning is clear. The US advantage in AI is not unassailable. And companies like NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel could see growth projections and valuations recalibrated sharply if these workarounds scale. While Washington worries about rare earths, chips, and trade, another pressure point has quietly opened at sea. A Russian-flagged tanker, part of the so-called Shadow Fleet, and known in public reporting as the Seahorse, slipped into Venezuelan waters after days of maneuvering meant to evade US interdiction. American naval forces tracked the vessel, shadowed its route, and attempted to block it 6 days earlier. But in the end, they stepped back to avoid escalation, and the tanker reached its destination. That single arrival is strategically significant. It shows the limits of maritime enforcement when ships use flags of convenience, obscured ownership, and slow steaming tactics to mask their movements. A destroyer can shadow a tanker, but stopping one outright requires ironclad legal grounds and comes with political and military risks Washington increasingly avoids. Shadow fleets exploit precisely those gaps. And if one sanctioned tanker can get through, scaling the tactic becomes easy. Throughput follows. Energy starts flowing. Sanctions lose bite. One successful run is not an anomaly, it's the blueprint. This is where all the chapters converge. China uses export controls to pressure the US industrial base. Beijing shapes where advanced computing can legally operate, hitting companies like NVIDIA directly. Russia undermines maritime sanctions to keep energy partners alive. These moves work because they reinforce each other. Minerals, shipping lanes, and AI compute rules all become part of a coordinated pressure matrix that blunts America's traditional tools: tariffs, sanctions, technology controls, and naval presence. The result isn't dramatic collapse. It's something more dangerous, a steady erosion of U.S. leverage across domains that used to guarantee influence. So, do you think Trump can negotiate his way out of this corner, or is the global balance of power already shifting for good? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.